November 16, 2025, the USS Gerald R. Ford, all 100,000 tons of America's most advanced supercarrier, crossed into the Caribbean Sea. Within hours, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro ordered the largest military mobilization in his nation's history. For the first time in decades, a Latin American nation was preparing to challenge American naval supremacy in its own backyard. The world's most powerful military machine was about to face off against a determined regional adversary with nothing to lose. This is the story of how a counter-narcotics operation became the most dangerous Caribbean standoff since the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is the story of what happened when Venezuelan warships dared to challenge an American supercarrier. To understand how we arrived at this moment, we need to rewind to September 2025. The Trump administration had just launched what it called Operation Southern Spear, officially a counter-narcotics campaign targeting drug trafficking routes from South America to the United States. But on September 2nd, something unprecedented happened. A U.S. military strike, not the Coast Guard but the full military, destroyed a vessel departing Venezuelan waters, killing all 11 people aboard. President Trump claimed they were narco-terrorists. Venezuela called it murder. The strikes didn't stop. By November, American forces had conducted at least 22 attacks on vessels in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. The death toll? Over 83 people. Not a single arrest, not a single kilogram of drugs publicly displayed as evidence. Then came the incident that changed everything. September 5, 2025, two Venezuelan F-16 Fighting Falcons, American-made jets, ironically sold to Venezuela in the 1980s, screamed over the USS Jason Dunham, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in international waters. The Pentagon called it highly provocative. Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez called it defending our sovereignty. The lines were drawn. Over the next 2 months, the United States assembled the largest concentration of military assets in the Caribbean since the 1989 invasion of Panama. But the crown jewel was still in transit, crossing the Atlantic from its European deployment. The USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, the lead ship of America's newest carrier class, nearly 1,100 feet long, displacement of 100,000 tons, carrying 75 of the world's most advanced fighter aircraft, cost $13 billion. And it was coming to Venezuela's doorstep. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth personally ordered the Ford's redeployment. On October 29, 2025, the carrier strike group departed the Mediterranean, leaving its NATO commitments behind. Destination: the Caribbean. But the Ford wasn't sailing alone. With her came 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers: the USS Bainbridge, USS Mahan, and USS Winston S. Churchill. Each destroyer packed Tomahawk cruise missiles, SM-2 and SM-6 air defense missiles, and advanced Aegis combat systems. The Ford's air wing represented overwhelming air power. 4 squadrons of FA-18E off Super Hornets, the Navy's premier strike fighters, a squadron of EA-18G Growlers for electronic warfare and radar suppression, E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes for airborne early warning and command, and MH-60R Seahawks for anti-submarine warfare. But this was just the tip of the spear. Already in theater, the USS Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group, with 2,200 Marines from the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, the guided missile cruisers USS Lake Erie and USS Gettysburg, each carrying up to 122 vertical launch cells loaded with missiles, 3 more Arleigh Burke destroyers, a nuclear-powered attack submarine, likely a Virginia or Los Angeles-class boat, though the Navy won't confirm. Puerto Rico had become the operational hub. 10 F-35A Lightning II stealth fighters deployed to reactivated Cold War-era bases. At least 3 MQ-9 Reaper drones for persistent surveillance. P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft conducting round-the-clock reconnaissance. Roughly 5,000 personnel manning the installations. The numbers were staggering. More than 15,000 U.S. military personnel, over a dozen major warships, hundreds of aircraft, all concentrated in an area roughly 500 miles from Caracas. The international community watched nervously. Russia and China issued stern warnings. The Organization of American States called for de-escalation. But in Washington, the message was clear. On November 16th, as the Ford entered Caribbean waters, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that Cartel de los Soles, which he claimed was run by Maduro himself, would be designated a foreign terrorist organization, effective November 24th. This wasn't just diplomatic theater. Under U.S. law, designating a group as an FTO allows the military to target its infrastructure and leadership inside Venezuela without additional congressional authorization. On November 22, 2025, commercial satellite imagery captured the Ford approximately 500 miles north of Caracas. The positioning was deliberate, close enough to strike, far enough to remain outside Venezuela's engagement envelope. Almost. President Maduro didn't blink. On November 11th, even before the Ford's arrival, he ordered a massive mobilization of all Venezuelan military forces under Independence Plan 200. Ground forces, air units, naval assets, riverine units, coastal missile batteries, everything was placed on maximum operational readiness. It was the largest Venezuelan military activation since the failed 2002 coup attempt. But Maduro went further. The Bolivarian militia, a parallel military force of armed civilians loyal to the government, began mass mobilizations. Estimates suggest up to 3 million militia members received weapons and rudimentary training. On paper, Venezuela's armed forces total approximately 123,000 active personnel. The Army, 63,000. The National Guard, 23,000. The Navy, 15,000. The Air Force, 22,000. Add the militia and you're looking at over 3 million potential combatants. The Venezuelan Air Force operates a mixed fleet, Russian-built Su-30 Mk2 flankers, modern, capable multi-role fighters, approximately 23 operational, though maintenance is questionable. The F-16AB Fighting Falcons, purchased from America in the 1980s, may be a dozen airworthy. Chinese-made K-8 trainers that can carry light weapons. Air defenses include Russian S-300 VM batteries, SA-22 Pantsir S-1 systems, older SA-6 Gainful and SA-3 Goa missiles, and Chinese-supplied HQ-7 and FM-80 systems. On paper, formidable. In practice, questions remain about their operational status and integration. But what about the Navy, the force that would actually have to confront American warships? Here's the uncomfortable truth for Caracas. The Bolivarian Navy is massively outgunned. The entire Venezuelan surface fleet consists of approximately 15 to 20 major vessels. Most are patrol boats suitable only for coastal defense. The heavy hitters, 2 Italian-built Mariscal Sucre-class frigates from the 1970s-80s, displacing about 2,500 tons each. They're armed with automatic anti-ship missiles and 127mm guns. But due to sanctions and economic collapse, only one is believed operational, and operational is generous. 3 Guayqueri-class offshore patrol vessels commissioned in 2011 represent Venezuela's most reliable surface combatants. Modern by regional standards, displacing 2,400 tons, possibly fitted with Chinese C-802A anti-ship missiles. These are the backbone. 4 Pokop 30-class missile boats, recently acquired from Iran in 2023. Fast attack craft armed with Kosar or Nasr anti-ship missiles, designed for hit-and-run attacks in confined waters. The submarine force, 2 German-built Type 209 1300 diesel-electric submarines, the Sabalo and the Caribe. On paper, capable. In reality, neither has been confirmed at sea in years. Maintenance, parts, expertise, all victims of sanctions and economic decay. Venezuela's real advantage lies in asymmetric coastal defense, shore-based anti-ship missiles, Chinese C-802s, Iranian systems, possibly Russian-supplied Yakont missiles, fast attack craft that can swarm from coastal inlets, naval mines, cyber warfare capabilities developed with Russian and Chinese assistance. Defense analysts agree, Venezuela cannot win a conventional naval battle. But they don't have to win. They just have to make the cost unbearable. Consider the Houthis in Yemen. With far less sophisticated weapons, they've inflicted significant damage on Western naval forces and commercial shipping in the Red Sea. Iran supplied anti-ship missiles, suicide drones, asymmetric tactics. Venezuela has 1,700 miles of Caribbean coastline. Dozens of ports and inlets, oil infrastructure worth hundreds of billions. The potential for asymmetric warfare is enormous. And Maduro was gambling that the United States wasn't willing to risk a $13 billion supercarrier and the 4,500 sailors aboard to find out. By late November 2025, the Caribbean had become the most dangerous flashpoint on Earth. Two nuclear powers, the United States and Russia, Venezuela's primary arms supplier, were engaged in a proxy standoff that could spiral at any moment. The USS Gerald R. Ford maintained a position approximately 500 miles north of Caracas. F-18 Super Hornets flew round-the-clock combat air patrols. E-2D Hawkeyes provided 360-degree surveillance. Every Venezuelan military installation, radar site, and missile battery had been identified, tracked, and targeted. Venezuela conducted continuous military exercises. Exercise Sovereign Caribbean 200 in September. Exercise Cumanagoto 200 shortly after. Coastal patrol vessels running aggressive intercept patterns. Shore-based radars painting American warships. Fighters scrambling to shadow U.S. reconnaissance aircraft. The regional powers scrambled to avoid becoming collateral damage. Trinidad and Tobago, just 10 miles from the Venezuelan coast, placed its defense forces on the highest alert status. Colombia quietly reinforced its border. Brazil urged restraint. At the United Nations, Russia and China demanded an Emergency Security Council meeting. The measure failed, vetoed by the United States. In Moscow, a senior lawmaker claimed Russia had delivered new Pantsir S-1 and Buk M2E air defense systems to Venezuela. Unconfirmed but plausible. Inside the Trump administration, debate raged. Some officials advocated for immediate strikes on Venezuelan cocaine processing facilities and cartel infrastructure. Others warned of mission creep. Iraq and Afghanistan all over again. Legal advisors struggled to craft justification for attacks on sovereign Venezuelan territory. On the streets of Caracas, opinions were divided. Some Venezuelans saw the American presence as liberation, a chance to finally remove Maduro. Others rallied behind the flag, viewing it as imperialism. "We will die with our boots on," one supporter told CNN. Aboard the Ford, sailors and aviators prepared for what might come. Mission briefs identified specific targets. Strike packages were loaded. Rules of engagement were clarified and reclarified. Everyone understood. The next move could determine whether they'd be going home or making history. The incidents multiplied. Venezuelan fast attack boats approaching dangerously close to American destroyers before veering away. USP-8 Poseidons accidentally violating Venezuelan airspace claims. A Seahawk helicopter forced to take evasive maneuvers when Venezuelan coastal radars locked on. Each incident was a spark hovering over dry tinder. Military analysts ran the scenarios. If Venezuela attempted to strike the Ford with shore-based missiles, they'd face a layered defense. Destroyer-based SM-6 missiles with 200-plus mile range, carrier-based Super Hornets ready to intercept, EA-18G Growlers jamming fire control radars, and potentially cyber attacks disabling launch systems before missiles ever flew. But one lucky shot, one malfunction in the American defense network, one Venezuelan missile crew getting through. The political and symbolic impact would be catastrophic. No American aircraft carrier has been sunk since World War II. Behind the scenes, unexpected diplomacy. On November 17th, Trump confirmed he'd spoken with Maduro by phone, the first direct communication in years. Trump wouldn't reveal details, but sources suggested Maduro offered a deal. Access to Venezuela's massive oil reserves, 300 billion barrels, the world's largest in exchange for standing down. It was tempting. Venezuela's oil could reshape global energy markets, but accepting would mean abandoning the opposition, legitimizing Maduro, and appearing weak. Trump shelved the offer but kept talking. The deadline approached November 24th, 2025, the day Cartel de los Soles would officially be designated a foreign terrorist organization. The day military strikes on Venezuelan soil would become legally authorized under U.S. law. The day everything could change. Let's be brutally honest about the military matchup. In a conventional confrontation, Venezuela has virtually zero chance of damaging the USS Gerald R. Ford, much less sinking it. The Thord Carrier Strike Group represents the pinnacle of naval power projection. The carrier itself is protected by 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers, each with Aegis combat systems capable of tracking and engaging hundreds of targets simultaneously. They carry SM-2, SM-3, and SM-6 missiles with ranges exceeding 200 miles. The air wing provides layered defense. Combat air patrols can engage threats 300-plus miles from the carrier. EA-18G Growlers can jam enemy radars from standoff range. E-2D Hawkeyes coordinate the defensive network. Below the surface, at least one U.S. nuclear attack submarine shadows the group. Venezuelan diesel-electric submarines, if they're even operational, would be detected long before reaching attack position. American sonar technology, refined over decades of Cold War competition, remains generations ahead. Venezuela's best weapons, Chinese C-802 missiles, potentially Russian Yakont systems, have theoretical ranges of 75 to 180 miles, but effective range depends on radar targeting, which the Growlers can disrupt. Launch platforms would be identified and destroyed within minutes of firing. Here's how an attack would likely unfold. Venezuelan radars illuminate the Ford instantly detected by American electronic warfare systems. Growlers begin jamming. If a missile launches, SM-6 interceptors fire at maximum range. If it penetrates, SM-2s engage closer in. If it still comes, the carrier's own rolling airframe missiles and close-in weapon system provide last-ditch defense. Meanwhile, Super Hornets are already striking the launch site. But asymmetric warfare changes the calculus. Venezuela doesn't need to sink the Ford. Damaging it would be a strategic victory. A swarm attack using multiple fast attack boats, coordinated with shore-based missiles and potentially submarine-launched torpedoes, creates targeting dilemmas. Naval mines are cheap and hard to detect. Venezuela could mine strategic approaches, forcing American ships into predictable channels. Cyber attacks could target communication networks or GPS systems. Disinformation campaigns could complicate targeting decisions. If this escalates to land operations, Marines hitting beaches to secure ports or capture leadership, the calculus shifts dramatically. Venezuela has 3+ million militia members, many trained in guerrilla warfare. Iraq and Afghanistan demonstrated that superior technology doesn't guarantee victory against determined irregular forces. The question isn't whether America could defeat Venezuela militarily. It's whether the American public would accept the cost. Estimates suggest 502,000 U.S. casualties in the first month of a full invasion, costs exceeding $100 billion, years of occupation. And for what? Regime change that might not produce stability. Maduro was betting the answer was no. As of late November 2025, the standoff continues. The USS Gerald R. Ford remains in the Caribbean conducting counter-narcotics operations. Venezuelan forces remain on high alert. The crisis has neither escalated nor de-escalated. It's frozen in place. In Washington, bipartisan skepticism is growing. Lawmakers are demanding answers about the legal basis for the vessel strikes. Reports of a second strike on survivors in the September 2nd incident have sparked outrage. The administration insists every action was lawful. Critics call it extrajudicial killing. Internationally, the operation has damaged American credibility. European allies are quietly distancing themselves. Latin American nations view it as neo-imperialism. China and Russia are leveraging it for propaganda. Even close partners like Colombia are urging restraint. Economically, the uncertainty is causing volatility. Oil prices have spiked on fears of disruption to Venezuelan production. Shipping companies are rerouting around the Caribbean. The regional economy is suffering. Inside Venezuela, the situation grows more desperate. Economic sanctions combined with military pressure are crushing ordinary citizens. Food shortages worsen. Medicine is scarce. Electricity is unreliable. The very people the intervention ostensibly aims to help are suffering most. Military experts warn that this level of tension is unsustainable. Every day increases the likelihood of miscalculation. A Venezuelan commander misinterpreting American intentions. An American pilot making a split-second error. A technical malfunction triggering automated defenses. History is full of conflicts that began with misunderstandings. The Gulf of Tonkin, nearly World War III during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The downing of Iran Air Flight 655 by USS Vincennes. When tensions are this high, anything can spark disaster. Back-channel negotiations continue. Maduro wants recognition and sanctions relief. Trump wants the opposition empowered and access to oil. Both sides want to avoid war, but neither can appear weak. The diplomatic challenge is finding an exit ramp that both can take. 3 paths forward seem most likely. First, continued standoff followed by gradual de-escalation as Trump moves on to other priorities. Second, a negotiated settlement trading sanctions relief for political reforms. Third, an incident accidental or intentional that forces military action. Which path we take may be determined in the next few weeks. The Ford can't remain on station indefinitely. Venezuelan forces can't maintain maximum alert forever. Something has to give. The Caribbean crisis of 2025 reveals something crucial about modern warfare. It's not about who has the bigger guns. It's about who's willing to use them and at what cost. The United States possesses overwhelming military superiority. The Ford Carrier Strike Group alone represents more combat power than most nations' entire armed forces. American technology, training, and doctrine are unmatched. But Venezuela has something else: determination born of desperation, a willingness to employ asymmetric tactics, and the knowledge that America's post-9/11 wars have left the public skeptical of military interventions. This crisis also marks a broader shift. For decades, the Caribbean was America's backyard, uncontested. Now, with Russian arms, Chinese investment, and growing regional resentment of U.S. interference, that era may be ending. The confrontation between the Ford and Venezuela's ragtag navy symbolizes a larger question facing American power. Can high-tech military supremacy overcome determined resistance? Can aircraft carriers coerce nations in the age of asymmetric warfare? As the Ford continues its patrol, these questions remain unanswered. What we know for certain is this: the most powerful weapons system on Earth is engaged in a standoff with an adversary that, on paper, it should dominate completely. And yet, the outcome remains uncertain. Because in the end, military power isn't just about what you can destroy, it's about what you're willing to risk. And in the Caribbean, both sides are still calculating that risk. The next move could define the future of American power in the Western Hemisphere. We'll be watching